In this video, we'll try to understand how can we implement pivot and unpivot in SQL Server. Now, before we go ahead and we try to implement pivot in SQL Server, first let's try to understand what exactly a pivot means. So in order to understand the pivot function, you can see that I have created a very simple table here which has three columns. One is customer name, product name, and amount. And you can see that I have a couple of records here saying, like Shiv has bought shoes for 100 rupees, then Shiv has bought shirts for 200 rupees. Raju has bought shirts, but Raju has not bought any kind of shoes. And then we have Ganesh who has bought shoes and shirts, and then we have Jignesh who has bought only shoes. So I have, a very simple table here which, tells, which customer has bought which product at which amount. Now let's say that we want to visualize this data from a different perspective. For example, let me just open this Excel sheet over here. So let's say that you want to say that, okay, can you tell me, how many customers have bought shoes and how many customers have bought shirts? So for example, Shiv has bought shoes, right? So that is 100.23. Okay, nowadays there isn't any 23 paise as such. This is, just a hypothetical example. And again, you can see Shiv has bought shirts, so that is 200.34. Then we have Raju. Raju has not bought shoes, right? So this is 0. And Raju has bought shirts, that is 145.67. So you can see basically this row wise data, we have actually changed the perspective and made it column wise. So now, actually I'm seeing intersection of two data points. For example, okay, shoes is bought by Shiv, at this much amount. Then Raju has bought shirts, So in other words, pivot means, basically where we see intersection of two data points and we see some kind of summarized information. Now, the next question is, so how can we implement this in SQL Server? So the good news is that we have a very nice ready-made function in SQL Server called as the pivot function. And by using this pivot function, we can change, the row-wise data into a pivot data. So let me go and show you step by step how we can go and change this data into a pivot data. Now, before I go ahead and I demonstrate the pivot code, let me go and explain the pivot code, because if I start demonstrating the pivot code now itself, it can lead to more confusions because the code is a bit big. Okay, so what I'll do is let me first explain you the pivot code and then we will go ahead and execute this code in our SQL Server Manager. Okay. Now you can see there's a big image diagram which is displayed on the video, and this is the pivot code. This complete thing over here is a pivot code. Okay, so what I've done is I have divided the pivot code into three sections. You can see 1, 2, and 3. So let's start with the first step in the pivot code. So in the first step, we start with a select statement. So you can see that we have a very simple select statement over here, and this select statement has those column names which we want to display on the pivot report. So for example, in our pivot report, we want to display customer name, shoes, and shirts. So, the same column names will come in this select statement. So the first part of the code of the pivot code starts with a select statement, and it has those column names, which has to be displayed on the pivot report. Now the second part of the code actually gets the actual data which is needed for the pivot function. So our actual data is nothing but, these rows, right? If you remember, in the previous part of the video, I had displayed a table which had Shiv, shoes, 100 rupees, Shiv, shirts, 200 rupees. So that actual data is fetched by this second section. So the first section actually displays the column names for the pivot report, and the second section actually gets the actual data. Now let's talk about the third section. Now the third section of the code is where all the action happens. This is the section where your pivot function lies. So you can see that in this third section we are saying here pivot. Then the second thing is we are saying here sum of amount. So this is the amount column. So we want to sum up the amount, but we want to sum the amount by using the product name like shoes and shirts. So what it does is it actually says, okay, Shiv has bought shoes, okay, 100.23, and it just goes and fills in this column, right? So here we define two things. One is we define what kind of aggregation we want, sum, count, whatever it is, and on what data items we want. So we want it on shoes and shirts, right? So you can see I've defined here shoes and shirts. So now what happens is basically he takes these from the first section, he takes the column names, from the second section he takes the data, and from the third section the pivot function actually goes and translates these rows into columns and puts a summary amount. right? So this was a basic theory of how the pivot code looks like. Now let's go ahead and execute this pivot code and see this, all this thing, in actual action. So let's go ahead and do the actual practical. So the complete code is divided into 3 parts. Step 1, step 2. Let me just go and expand this here so that we can see and step 3, right? So in step 1 we define the column names, right, for the pivot. In step 2 we get the actual data, and in step 3 we actually have our pivot function, right? So the first step is we will go and select the column names of our pivot report. So the first column in our pivot report is the customer name. The second column we want is shoes and shirts, right? These actual values will be the second column. So I'll say here, okay, shoes as shoes and shirts as shirts, right? Let me just go and indent this. So this is here, because if we indent it we can read it properly. So there it is. So now the next step, so in the next step we have to actually give the actual data. So I'll say here, okay, these columns should be pivoted from this pivot data, right? So here I need to go and define, in this bracket over here, I need to go and define the actual data. So the actual data is select product name comma amount from this table, right? So there it is. So product name, amount from the test pivot table. Now my table name here is test pivot. Okay, right, good. So we have done step 1, define the columns. We have done step 2, which will actually fetch the data. Now the last step is we need to go and write the pivot function. So in this third step I will say here pivot round brackets, pivot what? Pivot the sum of amount. Now amount means this is the column, right? Amount column. So sum of the amount column, and you want to pivot this for, now this comma is not needed here, you want to pivot this for product name, right, in. Now what are the columns? There are 2 columns we have. One is shoes and the other one is shirts, right? And all these columns should be in a bracket, and we will say this is the actual pivoting. So the first select statement gives you the column name, the second select statement actually gives you the data, and the last pivot function actually tells that how do you want to pivot the data. In other words, what is the aggregation? Is it sum, amount, and on which values? Okay, so done. Let me just go and do a check syntax here. What is this? Incorrect syntax. Okay, this bracket should actually go here. It is not after the pivoting, so it should be here, right? And let me do a check syntax. Looks to be fine. Let me just go and delete this stop SQL over here. So there we are. Let me do a check syntax. Yeah, looks fine. And let me say execute. It says invalid customer name. But I do have a customer name column here. What is the problem? I do have a column name called as customer name. All looks fine. Oh, okay. See, now in the data, right, we have not selected the customer name, right? We need to select the customer name here as well, because at the end of the day it should come from the data, right? So this customer name is mapped here, that is good, and the product name is mapped to these columns, and that is good. Check syntax, execute. I've just become old, guys, so forgetting syntaxes here. So there it is now. So if I go and do a select star from this table over here very quickly, so that we can do a comparison, right? So there it is. You can see very quickly. Let me just pull this up. So that is our actually row wise data, and you can see now the below table or the below display actually shows how he has shown it in a column wise way, right? So that was a very simple example of a pivot function. Now what I would expect is the unpivot, right? I will not show it over here. I leave it as a homework to you guys so that you can do the unpivot function. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. In this video, we talked about, what exactly is pivot function, and then we also did a small demonstration of how exactly pivot function works. Thank you so much.